What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Crack-a-Pack series. Today, for what happens to be a very special episode, I think this is episode 340, which I guess makes it extra special, but really the important part here is we're opening up a pack of Classic 6th Edition. This is a really old set. I don't know exactly what year. I was gonna try and look. Oh, 1999. So right before the millennia, we got Classic 6th Edition, excuse me, and a lot of really cool cards in here. This does count technically as a core set. This is also an older version of Magic, obviously. And so do keep that in mind as we go through and look at our draft picks and things like that. The power level is not going to be what you expect it to be necessarily. And I do believe 1, 2, 3, and then the rare. I think we'll try and do that just to make sure we get the rare last so we don't get a, easy first pick. But we are going to go through every single card. Our first one here, Circle of Protection Red. So this is part of a cycle of 1 and 1 white enchantments. There's actually one for each color, I believe. It is an enchantment. You can pay 1. The next time a red source of your choice would deal damage to you this turn, you prevent that damage. So obviously a very narrow card in that it only affects red permanents, but, or excuse me, a red source, not permanents, but it is actually a very strong card, obviously. So my take on any of these, though, is that they will be sideboard only, because, of course, you don't know if you're up against a red deck at any given time until after game 1. But these are really great hate cards for specific decks. And so these tend to do really well in the sideboard. Just easy auto includes after siding, but other than that, not super high priority picks, if I'm honest. Sabertooth Tiger is a 2/1 for 2 and a red, and it has first strike. So something to keep in mind, I mentioned at the top of this that these are older sets. On top of that, this is a core set. Creatures at this time were not necessarily amazing. I actually posted something the other day of a old Legends card. I think Tobias I posted, which is like a 4/4 for 5 mana. It's like white and blue plus 3. It's like a ridiculous casting cost for just like a 4/4 vanilla creature. At that time, that was considered like a decent bomb. It's not amazing, obviously, but it was certainly something that could win a game. And so do keep that in mind as we're looking at some of these cards. Sabertooth Tiger on the onset doesn't look amazing. Actually not that bad, though. 3 mana, 2/1 first striker, that's going to be able to deal with a lot of creatures solely because of that first strike. And so if it didn't have that, it'd be a lot worse. That 1 toughness would be a very big consideration, but because first strike is printed on this card, it makes it a lot better. It's going to be able to deal with a lot more and not die to quite so much. So I actually really like this card. Not a bad opening one for this one as well. Lost Soul is a 2/1 as well for 1 and 2 black. It has Swamp Walk. So Swamp Walk basically just means if the defending player controls a swamp, then this creature becomes unblockable. There's all kinds of land walk. There's even Snowland Walk or something like that, I believe. But there's a lot of different things for this. This has now since been kind of retracted from new Magic sets. I don't believe they print this ever anymore. But the land walk ability was actually a really interesting kind of concept. But again, it kind of regulates it a little bit more to a sideboard card. Now, if we look at these two cards, they're both 2/1s at 3 mana. Technically, Lost Soul is a little bit harder to cast because it has 2 black, not just 1 of a single color. But it has higher upside in that it's essentially unblockable against the other black decks. However, against any other deck or any other color, it's kind of just a basic 2/1, which is not amazing. And so this is a classic case of a card that has a little bit higher upside if you're up against the right deck, but in general is going to be much worse than Sabertooth Tiger. Because Sabertooth Tiger is a much more like just all-out decent card, I'm much rather going to take that over this, but if I find myself in black later on, this is a really good card to pick up. Again, kind of like a sideboard card, protection of red kind of thing, where if you find yourself up against a black deck, this is a great thing to bring in. Hero's Resolve is 1 and a white. For an enchant creature, the enchanted creature gets +1/+5. You guys know how I feel about enchant creatures. I really don't like them for multiple reasons. The biggest one, you open yourself up for that 2-for-1. This one especially is not that amazing. It does give +1 on power, and +5 on toughness is quite a lot for only 2 mana, but it is to the toughness. And that just means it's going to stick around for a while, but it's not going to win you the game. You really want to be boosting up that power level if you can, as much as you can, just so you can start dealing more damage and hopefully ending the game sooner, not stalling it out longer. So I really don't like this card. I think this is quite bad. Dalian Soldiers is a 1/2 vanilla merfolk for 1 and a blue. I don't know Lord of Atlantis if that is in this set, if I'm honest, any of the merfolk lords. Either way, this is not the card that you take first. You definitely take the Lord first and then take stuff like this. This is not a very good card. It is just an okay 2-drop. It's really bad, though. It's a 1/2. I know I talked about how older Magic and all that kind of stuff, these creatures aren't quite as powerful as they are now, and that is true, but I really don't like that this only has 1 power. You could at least get a bear, I think, for 2 mana. So I don't love this one. Definitely not better than Sabertooth Tiger either. Redwood Treefolk is 4 and a green for a vanilla 3/6. Kind of similar to the Hero's Resolve thing in my mind, where this is just a very decent staller, and that's about it. It's going to not die very easily, but it's also not going to be dealing a lot of damage. On turn 5, you're playing a 3/6. That's going to be able to block for days, which is great, but it's not going to be able to actually swing in for very much because it's not a huge threat. It's only 3 damage a turn, if it is even swinging in. And so I really don't like this one. I don't think this is an amazing card. Sabertooth Tiger, much more aggressive, helps you get in there for some damage in the early turns. This really just kind of stalls you out, I think, long term. Remedy is an instant for 1 and a white. Prevent the next 5 damage this turn divided any way you choose among any number of target creatures and or players. Don't really love these kinds of cards. I've talked about these a lot, actually. The prevent damage cards, unless they're like reusable, like Circle of Protection Red, for instance, I don't think that this is a very good card because it's a one-shot deal. All you're doing is stalling for 5 damage. And yeah, that might be able to save you from a creature or save one of your creatures or do something like that. Great, but that's like the best it can be. 9 times out of 10, it's just going to be saving you 5 damage that you're going to take next turn and probably lose off of. So I don't love cards like this. I'd rather have something a little bit more proactive or a little bit more reusable or flexible, and I don't think that this is one of those cards. Trained Madan is a 3/3 vanilla creature for 1 and 2 green. Actually not a bad one, in my opinion. Anything that's on curve, especially in a set like this, I think in terms of stats, I should say a 3/3 for 3, I think is actually perfectly playable. It's not amazing, obviously, but for 3 mana, you're getting a 3/3 creature that's going to be able to deal, with anything on curve pretty much. It does block well against like the Sabertooth Tiger, for instance, which is another 3-drop. And so this actually has some good utility. Being able to just pump it out on turn 3, is exactly what you want to do. Perfect example of an on-curve threat. I don't think it's... I think I'd rather have the Sabertooth Tiger just in general, because that first strike is allowing you to deal with a lot of other things. Granted, not this card, but I like that Sabertooth Tiger. That first strike is really, really good, I think. And so I would take that here, I believe. Talrum Minotaur is a 3/3 for 2 and 2 red, and it also has haste, so it can swing in the turn it is played, and I actually like this card. I don't think it's bad. It's a 3/3 for 4, which is a little slow, obviously, in comparison to like the Trained Madan, for instance, but this can actually just swing in immediately, deal some damage. Depending on the board state, that's actually going to be really, really good for you. 3 damage on turn 4 is pretty solid. So I kind of like this card. I don't know if I like it better than Sabertooth Tiger, so I'm going to keep them together for now, and we'll see what we get through the rest of the pack. Painful Memories is a sorcery for 1 and a black. Look at target opponent's hand and choose a card from it. Put that card on top of that player's library. So this is like really, really bad hand destruction. The good thing about it is it does slow them down a bit, which is kind of cool. but it's only for a turn. Gotta be honest, this feels like a very blue effect almost, but I don't love this card. I think it's just kind of bad. Certainly it's nice to be able to like stall a little bit, and you know what the opponent's going to be drawing next turn, so you have perfect information off of a card like this, which is great, but it doesn't really do that much, unless you have a way to deal with the top of their deck, in which case I think this becomes much, much better, but in general, I don't think that this is a very good card. Dream Cache is a sorcery for 2 and a blue. Draw 3 cards. Choose 2 cards from your hand and put both on either the top or bottom of your library. This is like a really interesting kind of bad brainstorm. It's a sorcery speed. Let's just go ahead and say that. On top of it, though, you do get the option of putting those on the top or bottom, so you can kind of sift through more of your deck with this in comparison to Brainstorm, which I like. It is, of course, 3 mana, which is much worse, but it's not really fair to compare considering these are 2 different sets. We're not going to see a Brainstorm effect in something like this, so it makes a lot of sense. So I actually don't hate this card. You get to see 3 cards for the price of 3 mana. You also get to sift through extra pieces of your deck, which I think is quite good. And so I think there's some upside here. I think I'd rather lean towards creatures, though, in a set like this. Just go as aggressive as I possibly can. Usually a simple aggressive curve is going to do really, really well. And so a set like this in particular, where it's really all about, you know, just raw power level of your deck. It's a core set. You're not looking to do like absolute crazy things. You're just looking to curve out, deal enough damage to win, and that's kind of it usually. And so while this is a good card, I think I would play this card. I don't think it's better than the ones we've already got. Our first uncommon is Mana Prism. It is an artifact for 3 of any color. You can tap it and add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. You can also filter, so you can tap 1 of any color and tap this and add 1 mana of your choice to your mana pool. So you do have the ability to fix your colors with this, as well as technically ramp you. This does ramp. I don't know if this is amazing, honestly, in this set. I like to think it is. It keeps you very open, which is great. It allows you to splash colors very easily as well, which I think is quite important. But on top of that, this really is just like a solid first pick because you're never going to be locked into anything because of this. And you know it's probably going to be playable in basically any deck. So I actually kind of like this. I think I like it more than the other 2 picks. I know I just said I lean toward creatures a little bit, but I do think that this is a worthwhile first pick. A lot of that comes from that flexibility. It just allows you to do so many things. And so I think that that's really important in this set. Dread of Night is an enchantment for 1 black. White creatures get -1/-1. Well, this is this is exactly the same as Circle of Protection in red. It's a sideboard card. Very, very good sideboard card. Very efficient, but it is a sideboard card. You would not first pick this, but if you're in black, this is certainly a good card to pick up, just so you have access to it if you find yourself up against a white deck. Not much more to say than that. It's just a pretty good card against a white deck. River Boa is a 2/1 for 1 and a green. It does have Island Walk, so again, we kind of saw Swamp Walk earlier, but same effect essentially, but if the opponent controls an island, this creature is unblockable instead. And then it has 1 green, or excuse me, pay 1 green, regenerate River Boa. That's actually really good in this set, solely because you can like make sure that this stays alive pretty much. It gives you almost a never-ending blocker as well. There's a lot of really nice stuff with regeneration that you can do. You do have to leave up 1 green mana, but it's in the early turns of the game that you're looking to play this, and so it's usually pretty easy to do so. You do have to keep that in mind though for curve consideration, things like that. I don't know, solely because this is such a hard creature to deal with, if this makes it better than Mana Prism. It very easily could. It is more of an aggressive pick as well. And so it's going to have that random upside of Island Walk, but it's also just a really solid 2-drop anyway, because it's going to be able to deal with so much and just stay on the board for as long as possible. So I don't know. I'm going to keep them together. We'll see what our rare is right now. Wand of Denial is an artifact for 2 mana of any color. You can tap it and look at the top card of target player's library. If it's a non-land card, you may pay 2 life. If you do, put it into that player's graveyard. Ooh, that's an interesting one. I don't know if this is good, if I'm honest. It's a one-shot deal, which I don't like. You only get to do this once per turn. it is repeated over the course of multiple turns, which is kind of nice. And you can technically activate it at instant speed, but you are having to pay 2 life, and that's actually a steep price after a while when you're looking at a limited environment where creature dealing damage is like, that's the biggest thing you can do. So I don't know that I love this. I feel like it's a bit of a speculative pick. I think if you're just trying to stay as open as possible, Mana Prism, very easy first pick. It would really get you that flexibility that you need to kind of go through the rest of the pack and say, yeah, I can play whatever I want. River Boa, though, seems like the best creature in this pack. It's just because that regeneration makes it so hard to deal with. You really get the ability to block basically infinitely, at least something, which is really, really nice. And you can stack things on this and not worry quite so much about like a removal spell or something like that. As long as you leave up that 1 green, you're probably going to be okay. So I actually really like this. I think I pick River Boa here. That might be incorrect. Please, of course, if you drafted during this time, which I did not, please feel free to let me know in the comments section what your thoughts are. I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this, though, please make sure to leave a like or a comment down below. And as always, please make sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of our awesome content. But with that, I'm going to get out of here. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next Crack a Pack episode.